delegates to a constitutional convention. 16-year-old kid from Fredericksburg summed up one of the central lessons that the two-day pseudo-convention taught him and his classmates. He said, "It's more a question of what people do with it than it is the document itself." If only we could all learn that lesson. The world is littered with lovely sounding constitutions. Even dictatorships sometimes proclaim the rights of the people, the human rights of all. They proclaim and preach humane, high-minded visions, but ours is among the very few that, usually at least, represent practice as well as preaching. Of course, there are debates about what kind of practice it is. Some people say that the Constitution means exactly what the framers intended it to mean, as though we could somehow channel the dead. And most of the framers, anyway, were smart enough to know that they didn't have a crystal ball into the future. That's why they wrote lots of things in very broad terms. They talked about freedom of speech, equal protection of the laws, cruel and unusual punishment. Not much of the Constitution is hardwired with very specific clauses like 2 houses of Congress, or a person who runs for president must be 35 years old. It doesn't say the president must be mature or wise. 35 years old, that's a fairly mechanical rule. But a lot of the rules are not mechanical and require interpretation, and even if we felt bound by what the words meant at the time, what they meant at the time was a set of principles that people were smart enough to recognize were likely to evolve. Now, it is, of course, true that ours is a written constitution. And its very writtenness has long been a source of national pride and of the status of the text as a kind of icon. But many of the precepts and principles that nearly all of us would almost certainly identify as facets of our Constitution are written neither in parchment nor in print, but in the blood spilled on the fields of battle or in the muscle memory of our national heritage. Take, for example, the basic principle, the axiom, that ours is a government of laws, not men. That's pregnant with meaning. It's profound. It's critical. It's a standard against which we can judge what presidential administration does when it purports to evade the law. But you don't find that language written in so many words in the United States Constitution. Or take the axiom that no state may secede from the Union. It's assumed new relevance in the wake of things like the debates over Georgia and South Ossetia, and in the history of the Alaska Independence Party, which has as one of its platforms the secession of Alaska from the Union. Where do we get the proposition that no state may secede from the Union? We fought a civil war over it. It's written in blood at Gettysburg, not in ink. Or take the postulate that there are limits to the degree that government may dictate how we use our bodies, how we raise our children, whether we teach them a foreign language, what time you put them to bed, how you approach their homework assignments, who you choose to sleep with, how you shape your life. But there are limits to the degree to which government can control that in a non-totalitarian society. That's a fundamental bedrock axiom. It's hard to find anybody, except maybe 4 Supreme Court justices. There might be 5 at some point who would question that. Some of the questions about where you draw the line are very difficult. Take abortion. No end of debate about whether telling a woman she must remain pregnant crosses the line. But that's because of how imponderable is the value of the life on the other side of the equation. That's what makes that difficult. But it's not really a difficult question for most of us. whether the government has total say over the details of our lives. But where do you find that principle? It's not written down. It's simply a fundamental axiom of the invisible Constitution. And the axioms of the invisible Constitution are not simply the favorites of liberals or the left. You might think that if I emphasized control over reproductive destiny or over the composition of your family, well, you know, he's a liberal. Of course he'd think that people have a right to make decisions about that. But some of the favorite rights of the right, like states' rights, not written down in the Constitution. The 10th Amendment says that the rights not delegated to the national government are reserved to states. In some ways, a tautology. Which rights are not delegated to the national government? If Congress, for example, undertakes to regulate something that is related to commerce, and if everyone agrees that that's an exercise of Congress's power to regulate commerce among the several states, what if it chooses to do that in a way that treats the states as though they were simply departments of the national government? For example, in one of the gun control laws that Congress passed, in the Brady Bill, it said that not only is there to be a background check on people who buy certain kinds of weapons, but the chief local law enforcement officer of each city and town in the country must perform that background check. Congress, in effect, treated the cities as though they were sub-cabinet officers, directed them, commanded them to do this. Well, the court, 5-4, said, you can't do that. There's a fundamental axiom that the national government cannot simply treat the states as though they're puppets, any more than treat individuals as though they're puppets. In that one, the 4 liberals dissented, and they said to the majority, where do you find that principle in the written Constitution? It's not there, it's just a tacit postulate. And the people on the right say to liberals, when liberals protect individual rights that aren't exactly written down, where do you find that written in the Constitution? The answer is, it's not written there either. And the thesis of my book is, get over it. From the very beginning, the Constitution has meant much more than what is written. The Constitution itself announces to us that it means a lot more than what it says in terms of human rights. The 9th Amendment to the Constitution expressly says that the fact that certain rights are not enumerated in the Constitution shall not be construed, that's a direct instruction to us as readers of the document, shall not be construed to deny or disparage the existence of those rights. The Constitution itself announces right up front, there's more there than meets the eye. And there's more there than meets the eye across the ideological spectrum. This principle that there's an invisible Constitution is, to use a contemporary locution, it's not a principle written in red or written in blue, it's written in purple, just as some have said that we are not a nation of red states or blue states, but we are the United States of America. The story that I lay out in my book, The Invisible Constitution, is really the story of how these tacit, unstated postulates of the Constitution's overall plan, vital to the visions of left and right alike, and indispensable to the Constitution's enduring strength, might best be unpacked and understood. And what I do in the book is try to show 6 different models or perspectives that help explain the way we have grappled over time with what the Constitution means but doesn't actually say.